Well, it's 7 o'clock. I'm John Sarver. Let me call the meeting to order. And first item, as always, on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to add anything or make any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Okay, see Ned, second by Kendra. All in favor of approving the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay. Next, we have our minutes. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes from our last meeting? Seeing no hand, yeah. Okay, Ned, go ahead.
There are a few typos and things that I had questions about, but they're all pretty minor. And maybe I'll just send a marked up version to Leroy. I don't know what you want to do.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, Anna, can I have a second? Do I see a second? Oh, okay, Luca, thank you. And all in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting, please raise your hand. Okay, the minutes are approved, and we're, public remarks. Okay, we're up to public remarks again. It's a good thing I looked. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment? Okay, and we have another opportunity at the end of the meeting for the public to make comments. Moving on to new business, I'd like to welcome our new planning director, Tim Schmidt. Tim, would you like to kind of introduce yourself and make some comments? We're glad to see you in Meridian Township.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here. My name's Tim Schmidt. I've been in mid-Michigan now a little over a decade. I live, I can see Meridian Township from my window here. I just outside the township. We bought during the insane housing bubble that we are entering now, but we bought just before it, so we actually were able to negotiate a little bit. I have had a bit of an environment. I'm a planner by trade. I'm a built environment guy. Know my way around the building code and the engineering stuff very well, but I've had an environmental streak my whole career. I minored in environmental science, almost went to the environmental law route in college. You know, started off in a community that had a even stronger wetlands ordinance, I would argue, than Meridian Township. Came to East Lansing, got on the board of Michigan Energy Options, the oldest energy nonprofit in the state, and still on that. I've got one more year in my term. I drive an electric car now. I used to ride my bike to work when I was in East Lansing. So I have tried to live and breathe this stuff my entire career. And so I'm very excited to be a part of the Meridian Township team. There's a lot of good things that we're doing and a lot of good things that we can keep doing. I am just trying to keep my head above water right now as I am drinking from a fire hose. Mr. Kieselbach was, as I've said to multiple boards, an institution in mid-Michigan and an institution in planning in the state. And I will never be able to fulfill his shoes. I am trying to find my own path. So look forward to working with all the boards and commissions, but obviously, anytime Leroy calls me on this one, I will pop back over because environmental stuff does have a special place in my heart. And although I'd love to stay and join you this evening, my daughter was asking where I was last night. First township board meeting away from the house in a while. So I am going to jump off and do bedtime tonight. But we'll love to work with this group in the future and be happy to answer any questions you guys might have about me.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the introduction. And we're just, like I said, glad that you joined the Meridian Township family here. Do we have any questions for Tim? Boy, I think we're letting you off the hook this time. I don't see any hands raised.
What I like to see. That's what I like to see. I'm very easy to get a hold of. If you can't get me, get a hold of Leroy and he'll find me. We're right down the hallway. So
Track you down. Good. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing you in the future. So good.
absolutely, John. Have a good evening.
Take care. And next on the agenda is a discussion of wetland preservation stewardship. And I'd like to ask Kendra to kind of introduce the topic. Kendra, could you get us started?
Sure, I can get us started. So as you know, over 25% of our township is wetlands, and it's a very precious ecosystem that we have here that we need to look at protecting. And I'm quite familiar with the wetland code and ordinances. And so Trustee Winzinski and I have been working together, and I might ask Courtney to step in here and maybe take the lead on this discussion, please.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, sorry, I'm struggling with technology today. It's all day, every day. I don't understand, but nonetheless, so yeah, I'm super excited to talk a little bit more about this. I will say that I unfortunately had not been very familiar with the wetland ordinance, but in talking to Kendra and others, and then also with some of the developers coming to the board with new developments and/or land use. I've been looking and familiarizing myself with the ordinance itself. I was reviewing the ordinance, and then I know that some of the conversations I've had with residents, as well as with some of the land use decisions that are coming to the board, I thought it would be fantastic for me. I'm sure you're all well apprised, but fantastic for me and some new board members to maybe look at the ordinance and see what it is our responsibilities as an environmental commission are, and then maybe determine. I did talk with Director Kieselbach before he left about how this ordinance is being implemented. And there might be some gaps in that, some things that we can think about as a commission on how we may improve those gaps. But as Kendra mentioned, we are 25% wetlands. And I know the more we develop, the more I become aware of making sure that we are protecting those wetlands. Leroy and I have been looking into some of the wetland maps, talking with our great friends at Eagle and determining like where we were and where we are when it comes to the amount of wetlands that were in Meridian Township. And then as we develop and probably develop relatively quickly, how can we make sure that we're ensuring that that wetland protection ordinance is being followed, and that us as an environmental commission are making sure that we're doing all that we can to protect those precious lands. So I kind of that's kind of why I wanted to bring it to the board, more for my own information, but also to look to see if there's anything we need to do different. Do we need to look at the ordinance? Do we need to familiarize with the ordinance? Are we missing anything? I think Leroy, correct me if I'm wrong, the last ordinance that we had was it was adopted in 1991, but I think it hasn't been looked at since 2010. So it's been a little while.
Yeah, that's correct. And we had some suggested legal changes that we had intended to run by the board. At the same time, some of the other items on our agenda for policy changes, we never officially adopted those changes. So we, at the least, we should kind of go back and bring ourselves up to speed on that.
Yeah, so I put into the memo that's, I think, included in the packet, what I gathered from the ordinance itself, that our role is, as the Environmental Commission, And I feel like we've done a pretty good job, but I still feel like we're losing wetlands as we go. And what can we do to make sure that we're ensuring both at a residential level as well as a developer level that we're protecting these wetlands as much as we should be. And I don't know if it's helpful if I walk through those, or I don't know, John, what's your thoughts?
Well, you know, it might be helpful at this point to highlight maybe certain functions, certain responsibilities. Also, you know, if from your perspective there should be certain priorities, that would be helpful too. One of the things, just from my own personal experience on the commission, is that you know, since I've been on the commission, we've had a number of applications come in front of us, which we've kind of dealt with and made recommendations. And just very recently, at at Kendra's kind of suggestion, we did the brochure and did, you know, which is, I think, a good effort with respect to education. You know, you look at the responsibilities laid out in the ordinance, it's pretty broad and extensive, but yeah, I would appreciate if from having just kind of looked at it, if you'd like to highlight some things, and also the issue too, from your personal perspective, is there something that you know, should be a high priority for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can go through kind of what is within the ordinance that is our roles and responsibilities. But I think you kind of hit on it, John, that a lot of it, I think, and I'll say it's personally, not from a board member, but from a resident, just that education piece. How can we get this information out, not just to residents, which I think are really important, because I think that's where it might be more difficult to enforce, but also for developers and for staff at the township level, and just making sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to what the ordinance is, what are you know, what is expected, and then what do we do when we, you know, might notice something that could be affecting the wetlands, and how can we work together as a team, I guess. And I feel like we could be such a good sounding board and a safe place for people to come when there might be some, you know, concerns amongst the community. With that being said, it says within the ordinance, it says that we've got a responsibility to advise the township board and the planning commission and the director on wetland use permits, appeals of wetland use permits, and mitigation plans. So I do have a question with that. So John, you mentioned that you've seen quite a few things come through. I'm so very new. How does that process work? I did talk to Director Kieselbach about when those things come to us, and then, you know, when do we provide that advice back to, whether it be the planning commission or the board, to make those decisions, and how does that work in a process?
Well, you know, from my experience, and some of you who've been on the commission longer than I had probably want to add in, you know, we would see an application, and along with the application would be a report from our environmental consultant. So
Okay.
it was kind of, to me, a pretty good package of what was being requested, and you know, what the consultant thought. There was some discussions at different times about you know, whether alternatives had really been fully explored, because that's part of the process, is that, you know, have all the various alternatives been explored. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of what's in the public interest. I mean, that came up in our discussions. But, you know, we would kind of review all that material presented to us. A site visit was kind of arranged, which is very helpful to go out and actually around and kind of see what it really looks like. And then it, of course, led back to a discussion by the commission and a recommendation by us. I know there was a discussion at some point too, because some of us were surprised that not all decisions kind of went through that process. Some were just basically decided by the planning director and under certain situations. But Ned and Bill, I mean, you've been around longer than I have. I bet you have some kind of insights to share.
Yeah, I think that was an excellent recap, John. You hit the process and some of the discussion points that we've had, and that's exactly my experience. I think from there have been a couple of times where we've invited the township's wetland consultant to come and talk about the success of the mitigation efforts. And what we've heard from our consultant is that they've never had to use the bond to repair a problem with a wetland, that those wetland mitigation efforts have succeeded. And I would add that my understanding is that the board's position, the Board of Trustees has established a policy goal of no net loss. And if all of the mitigation has exceeded the area that was impacted and it has all succeeded, then by that measure, it suggests that we're achieving the board's policy goal.
However, we have had discussions and sort of debates about how valid a wetland replacement is when somebody says, well, okay, we're going to mitigate the impact of a given area of development by extending a wetland that's already there, et cetera. And, the question is, what does it really mean to establish an effective wetland that delivers the services that, that a natural one does, or at least that one that's been around for a while does? And that's a really hard thing to evaluate. So I don't think we have any real answers, but the dialogue has gone on for a long time. The other thing is that there is a limit on the size. I mean, what is it? A quarter acre, I guess, is what triggers an actual analysis of the problem. So in principle, if somebody, is just shoveling dirt in a low spot in their backyard, that's not kind of big enough to cause the township to review it. But in general, what my experience on the commission has been pretty much that we relied on the consultants to have the expertise to assess in detail what the issues were. And then when we walked the site with the consultant's report in hand, we would ask various additional questions and go from there. And the other thing is, in general, not always, but in general, the board pretty much accepted whatever our advice was.
Well, and my recollection is too, we pretty much didn't find any fault with the recommendations of the environmental consultant. It seemed, as at least my recollection, that everything seemed, okay. The other thing I seem to recall too is that, in some ways, when these applications came before us, it ended up being an improvement because of invasive species and kind of other issues that, in the process, maybe they get rid of some invasive species and get some native plants and other improvements kind of to the wetland as part of the whole process. The other thing too, some of you might not be aware, we had actually a fairly long discussion over many meetings about a wetland bank, bank being basically for kind of smaller projects that maybe we could make some improvements to the nature preserves and actually convert them back to wetlands or make them wetlands. And that would be a way to generate some resources. And so maybe a real small kind of marginal wetland project, rather than make an improvement or mitigation, they would actually just kind of get a credit from the kind of the other project that had actually been an improvement to like one of our nature preserve. But let me open it up to Anna. Go ahead.
Yes, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So you said that the board wants no net loss. So we're saying that since the policy has been in place, there has not been a net loss of wetlands, but we don't necessarily know about the quality of wetlands.
Well, I think you know, by definition, you know, if a developer comes to us, you know, to the township, okay, they have to, there has to be no net loss. And so
Right.
that now there may be things happening out there, of course, that aren't known, and that and as Ned points out, you know, there are some areas that probably are wetlands that aren't actually regulated by the township. So we could actually be having a net loss, but certainly it's not because of any actions on our part. You know, at least the official process, as far as I know, never leads to a net loss.
Okay.
And to add to that, Anna, from what I understand, and Kendra's certainly much more well-versed in the ordinance. So for Meridian, we have extended and I can't think of the best word, but we've made it more restrictive to Eagle's regulation of a 2-acre wetland to a 0.25 acre wetland. So Meridian has adopted a more stringent policy when it comes to what is considered a regulated wetland. And with that, the board had adopted that when we are mitigating a wetland, so let's say we do have a developer that does have to impact a wetland of some sort, the mitigation has to be at a ratio of 2 to 1. So
Okay.
if we, you know, if we impact 1 acre, then that developer and or whomever is impacting that wetland has to reestablish 2 acres of wetland.
Okay.
And so that's where I think Ned, you mentioned is that, or maybe John, where that wetland bank might be more effective long-term, where we work to get some of this mitigation going towards a more, a larger and maybe a more effective wetland than just, you know, creating a wetland that may take some time, as well as may not, you know, provide those benefits that a larger wetland might provide.
You know, the other issue, I think that, you know, I have no firsthand knowledge, but it's safe to assume that, you know, there's a bunch of homeowners who have wetlands in their backyard and may not even know they're wetlands, and they do filling and, you know, who knows what else. And so, you know, I'd be surprised if there hasn't been some loss of wetlands, either because people didn't know or people didn't care. So that seems, how much like that has happened, who knows, right? But that seems kind of reasonable to assume that there has been some actions taken by homeowners that weren't appropriate.
I saw
Yeah.
Kendra's hand up several times.
Yeah,
Yes.
Kendra?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Yes, John, I would agree with you that folks may not know that they're on wetlands. I think that's where the education portion is really important, and maybe causing some damage they don't realize, and some don't care. And then also what Ned was saying, you know, if we think about the wetlands as kidneys, you know, and that they filter things through, you know, our natural kidneys, like in our bodies, you know, operate better than, you know, one kidney or having to get a transplant from somebody else. And so the wetlands that we actually have left, you know, are functioning, are more stressed. And this is really an environmental justice issue. And that's why we have to pay attention to this, and why we do have a, you know, stronger ordinance here, not only, you know, down to the 1/4 acre, but also the natural, the vegetation buffer, the 20-foot natural vegetation buffer, because those deep-rooted systems help protect those wetlands that are working harder. So if you can almost think about those as the medication to help the wetland function better with the one kidney. Because if we look at the amount of wetlands that we've lost, it has been significant and over, hundreds of years here. And then how much we've had loss over the last decade, that's kind of questionable based on the map. So, this really is an environmental justice issue. And if we just look at what happened in Midland, Midland, part of that issue was infrastructure, but it was also a loss of wetlands. And if we're over 25% wetlands here, and we've had dry seasons here the last couple of seasons, can you imagine if we had a lot of rains and the kind of flooding that would happen and the different kinds of things that could be problematic for a number of people?
Yeah, other people's comments or questions. One thing too, I think we should address too, is what are kind of the next steps? I mean, I think we would all recognize that this is a major issue. There's probably some things that could be done better. Certainly we could do more education, but it's like almost all the environmental issues we deal with, there's where to begin. But do anybody have any questions, further comments or thoughts on next steps? Tom.
Yeah, thanks, John. One thing that I did this afternoon to kind of prepare for this discussion was to look at the state regulations and compare those with the Meridian ordinance. And one thing that I discovered is that one of the state regulations is that the definition of wetland has to be the same definition that the state uses. And I also discovered and kind of worked on this a couple of years ago, the state actually changed the definition of wetland back in 2018, which took effect in March of 2019. So technically, and maybe this was one of the legal issues that Leroy was referring to earlier, but one of the things that we would need to do to the Meridian ordinance is to update the definition of wetland to meet the state definition. Unfortunately, a couple of years, in 2018, they, I would say, lessened the definition, if you will, to make it more conducive for possible development. But from a legal aspect, I think we do need to update the Meridian ordinance to equal that definition of wetland that the state currently has.
Yeah, and I don't exactly know why, we saw specific language that had been prepared to incorporate the state changes. So, it was all kind of laid out to us. Here's exactly what needs to be changed for us to be consistent with the state now. And those, didn't, I guess, officially get adopted. Bill, did you have a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, I really appreciate Tom's comments on the definitional issue. One of them that came to my attention recently was that when we look at wetlands, one of the key criteria is the presence of wetland species, plants and animals. And what that means is that if a property has historically had its land cover changed from something that might have been considered a wetland species to, say, a lawn, then at that point, it is no longer regulated because the plants that are there are no longer considered wetland species. And it's not a simple matter to go back in time and understand how land cover changed, but there have been issues where work has been applications have been received for work in a floodplain that you would think a floodplain would be a wetland. But if the floodplain has been converted to something more residential, then it would no longer meet the criteria for being a wetland because it doesn't have the presence of wetland species.
Courtney?
Thanks, Bill and Tom. So I agree that we probably have to, I would support that, looking at the updated definition of a wetland. However, I would also support that as a township, we could be more stringent, as a state employee as well. I wonder how protective some of those regulations and ordinances are. So I certainly support looking at that, but I wouldn't necessarily just be, I guess, conform to their definition, but at least look at theirs and see where we are as a commission and how do we feel where we need to be in this township. And then speaking to natural vegetation and over time, I wonder if, we talked about education and then we haven't really talked about enforcement yet, but if, we have even just a handful of residents or even more that aren't understanding the ordinance and are, making some of those setbacks into lawn, and now they're not consisting of those natural vegetation, how do we keep that from happening, right? So we're in a position where it does get tricky, like you said, Tom and Bill, that so we go out there and now the natural vegetation isn't there, but it was at one time. How do we step back and make sure that the wetlands we have now don't turn into lawn and or some other things, just based on the fact that myself wasn't fully educated on what a wetland was, what a setback was, and I feel like I could do a better job of educating the public on that to prevent that in the future, I suppose.
I wonder too, as wetland maps were developed a long time ago now, right? And I'm just asking this question. I would guess at no point in time have people actually been notified that they had property on the wetland map, because I'm assuming it wasn't done just because it'd be such a big task. But I don't know. Does anybody know that? Was there any ever notification done of that you got a wetland, Kendra?
Yes, it comes with the tax bill. There's a little notice that comes with the tax bill about whether you're on a wetland or not. I mean, you most certainly can tell a wetland by looking at it if you're educated about it, most certainly. But the township has the responsibility to educate its residents in that tax bill, and that's literally in the code. If you read through the code, it's literally in the code, and it says that. And to Bill and Tom's point, I think about like if things were changed in 2018, related to the wetlands, that they were filled in. Well, my guess is at some point in time, likely before 2018, there was, presence of, vegetation and habitat that was wetland, right? And so even though that definition changed somehow, some along the way, did that magically all happen in 2018 that people put lawns in? I doubt it. I think that probably something, people either didn't know or were intentionally choosing not to. And that's where I think intentionally choosing to make that into lawn. And I think, but when it gets a lot of rain, and I can tell you as a person who lives on the wetlands, in a spot where someone turns that into lawn, like it's going to get ridiculously wet. And that's where we're going to talk about flooding. So it's going to still show up, maybe in a different kind of way. And that's why some of those, those wetland maps, those aerial maps are super important to pay attention to in this entire process. And I can understand that maybe people had different values when maybe some of those changes were made. Maybe some of the leadership at the state had some different values. related to that, but I can tell you that leadership maybe now doesn't maybe have those same values, and most certainly on a federal level and on a state level, environmental justice is a big deal. And if we have any chance of addressing issues related to climate change, you know, the wetlands are super important in relationship to that. Earlier today, there was a question about like, what are some positive impacts that we can have related to addressing climate change? Well, protecting the wetlands, that's a big deal in addressing climate change. So I'm hoping we can look at this issue further.
Yeah, you know, I'm curious too, and maybe Tom, you don't know this, but I would kind of assume when the definition was changed, it maybe was just done in the regulations, or is it your understanding maybe that was done in law?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was done in statute. When I was looking at the Eagle website today, one of the stipulations they talk about as far as local units of government having wetland ordinances, one of the requirements is that the definition of wetland does have to be the same definition that the state uses. So, you know, please don't get me wrong. I am strongly supportive of preserving wetlands, but I think for our ordinance to be enforceable, we do need to, the township board does need to make that change in order to conform with existing requirements in state law.
Tom, you know, I probably everybody would understand this, you know, when a application comes in, basically they're using the same forms to send to the township as they are the state. And that's for obvious reasons, to make things easier for everybody.
If it's big enough to be state regulated.
Oh, that right. But don't they use the same form either for a small one that isn't state regulated, or maybe not? We don't know.
I can't remember.
Well,
but anyway,
yeah.
Tom, do you know, was there anything besides the definition that kind of constrains the township for how we do things?
No, not to my knowledge. There is kind of some stipulations as far as regulating wetlands under 2 acres in size. And it basically says that a local unit of government can do that if they have the local ordinance in place. But it does say in state regulations that, let me just read it here. It says must grant a permit unless it is determined that the wetland is essential to the preservation of the community's natural resources. And I think it's fairly easy to determine that it is essential to the community's natural resources, and that's why Meridian and numerous other communities around the state do regulate smaller wetlands. But I think that's in our ordinance too, that it spells out that one of the stipulations is that it's essential to the preservation of the township's natural resources. But so I think we're fine there. The only thing, again, the only glaring thing I saw was just the definition of wetland needed to be consistent with the state definition. So again, I think eventually it would be wise to make that change.
And that was when we did have that kind of updated language presented to us, that was kind of highlighted that the definition had changed. Bill?
Okay.
I was just going to underline Tom's comment about the essentiality determination. And in my experience, it's rare that the board decides that a wetland is not essential. And typically it's very small and degraded, and it's a roadside ditch. but for the most part, that process is well enshrined in our process.
Well,
Hi,
yeah, go ahead.
Joelle here. Now, was the definition watered down from the state definition? That's my question.
Yeah,
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
well, yeah, I would say that the intent of the change, of the state change 2 or 3 years ago was to water down the definition slightly. I don't think it's drastically watered down, but I think that was the bill sponsor's intent originally. And then through negotiations with various interest groups, you know, the original language was changed, but I think it got to a point where most people accepted it. I would say it's still maybe slightly watered down from the previous definition, and our previous definition in the Meridian ordinance, I noticed, was identical to the former state definition. So,
well, and I'm guessing, Tom, I don't know this, but it probably had the changes probably had a lot to do with farmers who had made changes to their land probably for a long time ago, and you know, they wanted to avoid problems with farmers having made changes that it would be hard to maybe reverse, is what I'm guessing. But you know, that was probably the impetus for the change in definition. But you know, I'm speculating, but it kind of makes sense. You know, one thing that let's talk a little about next steps, because you know, this is an ongoing discussion, I think. One that seems obvious to me is that the state changes should be incorporated in our ordinance. If I remember correctly, you know, the language was kind of done by somebody who kind of knew what they were doing, I think. And so I would put that on our to-do list. What other suggestions do people have for kind of next immediate steps?
I'd be curious to know what other, I mean, even Tim Schmidt, when he was speaking, said that, oh, he comes from a community, I believe he said, with an even stronger wetlands ordinance. So I guess I'd be curious to know what are these other stronger wetlands ordinances and what opportunities we may have to become stronger.
Yeah, maybe we could have Tim come to our next meeting, kind of give us a little you know, share with us his past experience. I think that would be excellent.
Yeah.
Other suggestions for next steps, Bill?
Yeah, one thing that I've been thinking more about is that our drain commissioner has become more and more insistent on detention basins in new developments and redevelopments. And for the most part, those are really meant to control the volume of stormwater and not necessarily aimed at functional wetlands. So that may be another area where we might, in ordinance or in other policy, encourage the creation of things that at least function the way we want wetlands to function, even if they're largely artificial. And there's a lot of them around. They're being constructed every day, even out by Lake Lansing. So that may be another area where the commission could kind of try to have some impact on wetlands.
That sounds like a good approach too. It sounds like, right, the approach we would have to have is to try to influence the drain commission and how they do business, I guess, right?
Well, the drain commission has a strong authority to impose conditions on projects, but their authority is mainly directed towards controlling flooding. But I believe the current drain commissioner is also very much amenable. If you look at Tower Gardens and the drain project out in Frandor, the Montgomery drain, very much amenable to not just looking at volume, but also looking at quality. So a partnership there with the drain commissioner, I think, could be very effective.
Well, that kind of leads me to Courtney. Oh, did you raise?
Um, Yeah, I was. Thank you. Bill, you make a very good point about the drain commissioner. And I think the most important point you just made was, of course, their whole job is related to flooding. But if we can maintain our overall, volume of wetlands, that itself contributes to that recharge, right? So if we can maintain what we have, I think the drain commissioner would be amenable to that, and we have a little bit different perspectives, I say, but I know our drain commissioner, Lindeman, has always been an advocate of wetlands with Grossbeck and everything else. I'm wondering, I don't know how the commission feels about, so we talked about the changes to the definition and then also becoming partners with the drain commissioner. I think is a fantastic idea. For myself, I'd like to even become more familiar with our existing ordinance and then maybe compare that. And I don't know who made the suggestion against Mr. Director Schmidt's experience with his previous office, but looking at maybe other ordinances and where we stand, and maybe then we can review, and then, I don't know, as a commission, would that be appropriate for us to review and then make suggestions to either amending the ordinance and or at least looking for gaps and where we might be lacking to ensure that we are contributing to the entire wetland volume, as well as working with the Drain Commission, which I think is really important. And then, John, we do have our new wetland brochure. And Kendra, you mentioned that that it's on our sewer bill, that it comes on, that designates whether you're in a natural vegetation or in a wetland area. Is it possible we could get that brochure out with that bill as well? And that way the folks that are within those areas can become a little bit more educated on why it's important and how you can enjoy your property, but still maintain the integrity of your wetlands.
Yes, that would be great. I mean, earlier this year when the tax bill went out, I think we were all a tad disappointed that it didn't go with it, or something a little bit more substantial went out with it. It just said that whether you're on a wetland or not, or you could be, or you could look at the map at the township office. But I mean, I think that most certainly, whether it goes out with every tax bill or just the tax bill of properties connected to wetlands, that most certainly would be really helpful, because, residents being educated, staff being educated on what the ordinance is. And mind you, right, like we just sent you 20 pages of the ordinance, and that's not all of it, right, related to the wetlands, because there's another one related to the natural vegetation buffer, which is actually under water features. So that's in a different area, and actually probably should be put in with the wetlands so it's not difficult to find. And I think that's 47-261, if I think I know by heart. Most of the ones I do. Unfortunately, I know the wetland code by heart. So I think that, educating everybody, and I think that, educating the staff and with the intent that, we have Director Schmidt, who's new, number one, but two, the staff that's already been there. I mean, I don't even know how many pages the code of ordinances are, right? And how does someone remember all of that, right? And I know that, I think Leroy was working on something, for the code enforcement officer for different areas, to have like a little cheat sheet of the ordinances, to help educate staff and the residents and everything like that. But I think education's the key, and then educating everybody, and then enforcing. We have to enforce. We're having a problem with enforcement, most certainly.
Other thoughts or comments? Tom?
Yeah, just lastly, I know a couple of people have mentioned comparing the Meridian ordinance with some other local ordinances. There is a list of other communities that have local wetland ordinances in place on the Eagle website. surprisingly, there's only 44 local units of government statewide that have their own wetland ordinance, but 4 of them are right here in Ingham County, actually. Obviously, Meridian, Delhi, the city of East Lansing, and Williamston Township all have wetland ordinances. And then there's numerous communities in both Oakland County and Washtenaw County that have their own local ordinance. So there's certainly plenty to compare ours with. But frankly, I think ours is in pretty good shape, but it's certainly never hurts to compare with other communities to see if there are any gaps that we might need to fill.
Well, like the SEMCOG, presentation we had, 2 months ago, talked about that, how they have the One Water campaign down there. And I think that's what we need to think about this. The wetlands help keep our water clean, and I think we all can agree that we want clean water. What do we all agree on? We want clean water, we want clean air. It does both, right? It prevents flooding. So I think educating, and then I think we've also talked about like having a regional, that's what they do at SEMCOG, right? They have a regional, they work together. And I think I remember talking with Cliff and Lauren, about like, at a regional level, working together on this, right? So that it's consistent across the regions. And then that way, we're all working together to address wetland loss and address climate change.
Other thoughts or comments, Anna?
Yes, Kendra, you just mentioned that we also have an enforcement problem. So I'm curious if you have thoughts on next steps in terms of, addressing any enforcement problems we may be having.
Well, I think the first step is education. So educating everyone, and then buy-in, and it has to come from leadership. And that's why, I appreciate Trustee Linzinski spending time with me, to hear about it, because it has to come from leadership on down, like SEMCOG said, right, to make this be an important area to address.
Roy?
Bernadette has mentioned an interest in water conservation. We have, 3 students at our meeting, which is pretty remarkable. I think we had 4 with Audrey, and it can come from the top, but it can also, not to say that the students are at the bottom, but they're the future of our community, and maybe involve getting some input from the Earth Club, and the students will be a piece of this. The other aspect is just to think about wetlands are a part of our green infrastructure, as are our community gardens and our nature preserves and our parks and our lawns. And we've got a nice list of improvements to our codes that Cliff from Tri-County Regional Planning put together, that if we're going to be revising our code of ordinances, we may want to just consider having that in tandem. But I'm curious what you guys think about both of these ideas. Involving students and, including in the green infrastructure audit results as part of this code review.
Yeah, but maybe, all the students or some of the students could respond. One thing that you could give some thought to too is, how do schools help us in our education efforts? Because the education of the community is a big task, and you may have some ideas along those lines too. Do any of the students attending have any comments or thoughts? Luca, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I know that education really starts with the kids and schooling and whatnot. And so I know, or I've noticed in the past, or have attended classes in Okemos specifically that are based around like outdoors activities and exploring the outdoors. And I think we've got a really good like baseline of getting kids outdoors and showing them our wetlands and showing them how to take care of the outside. But I think there is more that we could be doing through the through specifically the high school. The lower levels do a really good job of it, but I don't know. I feel like we could get the Earth Club or something involved in trying to get a class together that teaches more about the outside.
Yeah, if Ned, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, because it's been a while since I've been in high school, I mean, one of the things that my perception is that there's reasonably good teaching about sort of ecology and the systems that nature employs to clean water and so forth, you know, filtration and, you know, how wildlife gets born in wetlands and so forth, but perhaps not as much on the interface between human infrastructure and things like wetlands. In other words, how do our drainage systems, our water delivery systems, the fact that we salt the roads, all these different practices that are part of you know, existing of a human community, you know, being overlain on the land. I'm just wondering how much is that, other than sort of hand wringing, how much is that sort of formally discussed? Looks like Joel has an answer.
I don't have an answer, but you know, one of the lawns use more chemicals than commercial farming. And, you know, Okemos, it seems like every business around or lawn company is synonymous with poisoning the earth and the air. And I don't think people have a clue it ends up in our drinking water. You know, I mean, I don't know what gives people the right to poison everything. And, you know, I going back to the definition being watered down, the township voted to pass something that the recommendation committee all voted no for. So it's kind of like they're going to do what they want, you know, follow the dollar, something. So I am not impressed with them, the integrity, but the poisoning of the earth is a big nuisance for me because I walk my dogs and there's, you know, pellet fertilizer and, you know, chemical pesticide. I don't know what they're trying to kill. Anyway, that's
Anything,
all I have to
Annika?
say.
Go ahead, Annika.
So back on the subject of like what school education and the environment and stuff. So in AP Bio, that's like the only class where we go through all the cycles, but they mainly focus on commercial stuff, not, as Joel was saying, like home pesticides and that kind of. And so we do have an AP environmental course, but that's online, so I'm not entirely sure how effective that would be at.
Thank you. Audrey?
When whoever was talking about for like education about systems, I actually, for Earth Club, like I've done a lot of research on kind of the systems of like how stormwater like works, and that was kind of, or Bernadette and I were both also taking the AP Environmental Science course that Annika mentioned, and there is also an environmental science class at our school, but it's not like a required course. My 9th grade physical science teacher, Mr. Chapman, was like more focused on like climate change, and I don't think that, and I actually didn't get a full year of biology because that was my sophomore year, that was ended earlier. And so when I was doing research about wetlands, I think there are things that I generally knew, like I know wetlands are good, but I didn't actually really understand the concept or like exactly the chemical processes anyways of how that works. And I also didn't understand the like the commercial systems and the community like the city planning aspects of those things either. And I learned more about that through my AP Environmental Science course, but then mostly getting interested from that course to do my own research. And now it's kind of hard for me to differentiate between what I learned in school and what I've looked up on my own. But I think that at the very least, schools could probably do more to get their students interested in researching on their own, but more like giving the tools to do good research on their own, because I think I've learned some things about doing research from doing research. And sorry, that's not very helpful. But I think there's definitely more things that the schools could be doing. I guess.
Bernadette?
I agree with what everyone has said so far because like I didn't like learn about like wetlands and everything like until I did more research on my own, kind of like what Audrey said. But like I don't know, somehow like it would be great if there was like a class, like it was like a required class at the high schools for like environmental science, because currently it's just like optional, like you can take if you have time in your schedule, but I feel like it should be required because, you know, like students need to learn about what's going on in the world around them.
Luca?
I personally agree with everything that's been said before. And then I think that personally being a sophomore right now, and I know Audrey didn't finish up bio, but I'm currently, I'm in the end of the bio, so I'm starting to maybe get some, but we're learning about ecology right now. And but we're not learning about area specific ecology. So it's more of ecology maybe on Isle Royale or somewhere that's like kind of geologically isolated. And so I wish we would learn more about like our area's ecology and more about our wetlands. And I know we did something in 8th grade or 7th grade where we learned specifically about our wetlands and how to preserve them and what's in them and our own like our own ecology. But I personally wish we had more based on our area rather than other places.
Okay, Joel, did you have another comment you wanted to make?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Did you have another comment you wanted to
No,
make?
I'm just sitting here, so.
Okay, Bernadette?
Well, kind of going off what Luke said, like I learned a lot about like what's happening locally through like the Meridian Conservation once I joined that, and I think it'd be kind of cool if somehow like the different high schools around here, they could like maybe do like a field trip or like somehow like work with Meridian Conservation for a day or something, because I think that'll like help the.
That's a good thought, good idea, Ned.
So I completely agree with that, and especially given the unbelievably good asset we have in having Emma be part of our community, we are in an unbelievably lucky, place to live, just because of, well, that's just one person, but she's a really important person. But the other thing I was going to say is that I teach a green chemistry class to freshmen at MSU, and part of the reason that I asked the question about sort of infrastructure is that I've taken these students to things like the sewage treatment plant or the water plant and things like that, and it's just sort of struck me how eye-opening those experiences seemed to be for them. And I'm not trying to take credit for it. I'm just trying to say it's really easy to live in this world and not know where the water comes from or where it goes to, and a whole lot of the other questions that go along with that. How does electric power get distributed? What are all those things that are under our streets that occasionally you see the orange trucks working around, et cetera, et cetera. And all of those things actually significantly intersect with and moderate, the natural processes that we are talking about here about wetlands delivering and various other things too. And so I sort of wish that there were a much more integrated educational processes going on that talk about how these things fit together.
Audrey?
What you just said, Ned, reminded me that Mr. Chapman, my physical science teacher, also had a field trip that students could go on that I went on, and he took us to I forgot where it was, but he took us to like the big water treatment plant in Michigan.
Muskegon.
And where was that? Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah. Yeah, around Muskegon. And like, we like toured it and then we went on a submarine. That was different. Oh, when we went like Michigan. No, we didn't. Went on like, no, we went on a, whatever, but we like, it was a whole field trip based on like, we learned about like eutrophication in like Michigan, and it was really cool and really interesting. But like, you didn't have to go on the field trip, and it wasn't that big of a field trip. It was just like 3 parents drove, like there were 3 cars that were going and like 20 kids, and we just like, or obviously not 20 kids, but we just went and we learned. I learned a lot, and it was just more like an experience apart from school. But that was really interesting, and there are lots of very engaging teachers at the high school and like all over that do stuff like that, and I appreciate that.
That's fantastic. Did you get to sleep on the submarine? The Cub Scouts did that.
Courtney, go ahead.
This is fantastic. So I feel the energy from our students as well as our professors clearly, and I want to go back to freshman year at at College of Ag. But I'm wondering, John, if I couldn't challenge our students to maybe work with Kendra and I on maybe an action plan for our next steps in wetlands. And what I heard was several great ideas, was reviewing the ordinance itself, looking at the definition of wetlands with respect to the state regs, and then maybe making recommendations on any changes and or what the board could do to help. So I feel that and I hate to throw Kendra on that bandwagon, but I think that maybe we could, at an educational level, we could do this maybe as a residential level. But I think the students are right. We need to start younger too, and we've got teachers in the crowd. So I would be willing to take that on to maybe help facilitate. So just want to throw that out there.
Excellent. Courtney, thank you very much. I think that's a logical next step for kind of dealing with a number of the different issues. The other thing I would suggest is that, Leroy, you approach Tim and ask him to join us maybe at the next meeting to talk about his experience with other townships with respect to wetland ordinances. And also I'd like you to ask Tim too, if he has any thoughts about education of staff with respect to these issues, because that's been brought up a number of times, and it sounds like, if we're going to be educating staff, probably the planning department is a good place to at least discuss that issue. Let's see, somebody, Bill, did you have your hand up, or Ned?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay.
Sounds
Anything?
good.
Yeah, I think we have a couple next logical steps, and this is an ongoing discussion. Well, we'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting too, and probably for the foreseeable future. I think there's a lot that we need to do, but we've got some people working on it between now and the next meeting. And I wonder too if there's anybody, and I don't know if you would want to do this, Bill, but it wouldn't hurt for somebody to approach the Drain Commission to see if they would be willing to sit down with us and kind of talk about what you had suggested, Bill.
I'd be happy to do that. I believe that Tim Schmidt probably knows all those folks, but if he'd like some contact info, I'm happy to help.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. Leroy, why don't you mention that to Tim too, that we would like to have some dialogue with the Drain Commission about these kind of the issues basically Bill brought up. So before we move on the agenda, any further thoughts or comments? Ned, did you?
Just a remark about the Drain Commission. I mean, it's I would say on average maybe once every 2 years or something we would have some kind of direct interaction with whether it was the drain commissioner coming in making a presentation or Carla Close participating in a meeting or whatever. For quite a few years, when I first got on the commission, Carla Close, who's the deputy, I think deputy is her title, drain commissioner, was actually a member of the environmental commission. So I think they're very open to and interested in interacting with all of these issues.
Especially in an
yeah.
age of Zoom where they don't have to get in their car and drive.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it does sound that maybe Tim should make the inquiry. Probably Carla is a good place to start with the contact and discussion. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, both she and Pat are pretty passionate about what they do, in my experience. So yeah.
Carla's got the experience, having been on our environmental commission, so that's a good place to start. Any further comments before we move along? Okay. Okay. Well, again, let's put this on the agenda for the next meeting. And Leroy, did you have anything you wanted to say about the application from Jean McDonald?
No, I did notice that it did not show up in the second packet. I mean, didn't see the whole thing. She applied for several commissions, but she was also interested in future tree planting initiatives. So I just wanted to, I don't know if anyone else knows Jean McDonald, but wanted to encourage her participation. If you think that she would be a good member of one of the commission in the future, just attending meetings. We don't have any openings right now, but or on one of our subcommittees, such as our tree team.
Yeah,
So,
I think you should go ahead and invite her to join the tree team. Seemed to make a lot of sense, considering she specifically mentioned that in her application.
will do.
Yeah. And I guess okay, moving on to green infrastructure grants for schools. Leroy, do you have anything? I saw some notes from Rose. She wasn't able to be with us tonight, but do you have anything you'd like to report, Leroy?
Do you mind if I share my screen real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay, Rose reports that there's some activity going on with students at the Radmore Montessori greenhouse, and she shared some pictures. I also got an update today from Hazlitt Middle School. They sent me a quick update, and I don't want to steal their thunder, but they've got a strong team and have made some progress cleaning up this courtyard, and beginning to brainstorm potential improvements. And they are also potentially available to present at a future environmental commission meeting, maybe at a green dialogue or at a board meeting. So I'll let them give the full report next time on that.
Leroy, just for practice purposes, but also for the green dialogue participants, I would encourage you to invite them to a future green dialogue as the next logical step. Having them report to us too, and the board would be great too. But maybe a good start is just a short presentation to the green dialogue group.
Be happy to. Yeah.
Any questions about the green grants to schools? Okay, let's see. Well, I don't think we don't have a tree team update, right, Leroy? Because we don't have Rose with us, or.
Right. The only thing that I would add is that we did end up distributing all of the trees, thanks to some of our volunteers. Bernadette was there. We have an engineer intern that helped, and several of our members of our green team were at the market distributing trees. So that was, I would say that was successful. Also, we owe some of the credit to past members of our environmental commission for lining up the donation from MSU's tree research team. So Jim Kilbasa, and I'm sure some of you were involved with that I'm missing, but yeah, that's the brief update.
Yeah, and I don't have a chair's report, so we're back to you, Leroy. Do you have a staff report?
A brief one here. Let's see if I can share my screen again. Okay. Here's the green resources table that we've staffed at the market the last during May, and here's a couple of our volunteers. You might recognize one of them.
I'm not seeing that content.
We're seeing Hazlet Middle School.
Are you? Huh, interesting. Okay. Let me try again. Is it showing up now?
Yep.
That's great.
Okay, this is Madison, environmental engineer, intern, and Bernadette. Apparently at our next farmers market, we're not required to wear masks if you've been vaccinated, so that's kind of exciting. We'll be meeting with the green team to talk about the future green resources staffing. If any of you would like to be at the table, it's kind of a fun opportunity to check out the 50 vendors that are there, and you know, see neighbors and talk about the stuff. You might notice the wetlands brochure in there somewhere. We've also got some pollution prevention brochures. This is the bike recycling day that we did a couple weeks ago. There's some rain barrels available from our Public Works Department. If anybody's interested, as well as a fact sheet on how to install a rain barrel. This is one way to kind of further education about water resources, about stormwater, and use water more efficiently. We try and give away 30 or 40 of these a year, so this is sort of just something I wanted to mention here, and to anyone else who's listening. There's also a sustainability conference going on right now, and I'm tuning into a few of these. It's not too late to register. It's online. It's only $35. There's quite a bit of information being given out, and there's some recordings being made too. So if you're interested in any of the 36 presentations, I'll try and hopefully have access to that. We're also going to do another work day at the Rain Garden on Friday at the roundabout at Park Lake and Bircham. This is shots from last Friday when Emma and Sarah and a couple other residents from the area showed up with weapons and removed weeds. We also learned about some of the different plants in the roundabout, thanks to help from Emma. And then working with the community garden to install some some water barrels. This community garden at Briarwood has never had real access to convenient water, so they're really excited about these rain barrels. And our Public Works Department is going to fill these hopefully in the next week or so. And then I try and put a lot of this stuff in the Green Gazette, which some of you may already have access to. But if you don't, this link will take you to a place where you can sign up, as well as several of the past issues of that, if you want to sort of catch up on. It's just one of the ongoing resources that we have access to. I won't talk about this other stuff, but I'll share these links later if you'd like to kind of explore further. Any questions?
Well, Leroy, I think the Green Gazette is excellent. So it's really I always look forward to seeing it, and I think you're doing a great job kind of getting information out there. Bill?
Thanks.
Yeah, I second that. The Green Gazette is awesome. I wanted to invite Roy to share some of the discussion that's happened recently around the native plantings in the roundabout that we're hearing about, and kind of the recognition of the level of maintenance that is sometimes a big part of a project like that. And I can't think of a harder place to do it than in the middle of a roundabout, in the middle of a busy road. And if you're going to try to create a natural area, that's one of the most unnatural places to do it. but that sort of acknowledging that there are challenges to reproducing what we think of as a natural environment.
Yeah, it was kind of heartwarming to see the number of residents that came out in support of the roundabout through Neighborhood Next Door. I found out about a week after the conversation had started, and I was delighted to see that people had come forth in its defense. I mean, the roundabout in May didn't look that pretty, and a lot of native landscapes don't look that pretty in May. And things are changing pretty rapidly, especially with the recent rain. But it was nice to see, nice to have an opportunity to share some of the information about the roundabout. And I think it also helped engage some volunteers who were interested in assisting. There is a fact sheet on the roundabout, and there's just been a lot. There's been several dozen people and organizations that have been part of that. Recently, I think I shared the idea that maybe a mini grant program to help other neighborhoods do green infrastructure projects or neighborhood cleanups, environmental projects might be something that we could budget for. I know that the township board is interested in more tree planting, but there may be some ways that we can support some of these smaller scale or larger scale projects that come up through the neighborhoods, and then also help educate residents about what it takes to maintain and can I keep them going, because they don't just magically happen with a grant. So I'm not sure that's what you wanted, Bill, but thanks for asking.
That's exactly it.
Okay. I think that's any other questions? Okay.
Moving on to the various liaison and team reports, and I think Courtney, you're up first. What's going on with the Board of Trustees?
We're talking about wetlands and trees.
Good.
There's not too much to report other than there was one thing I did want to mention, and I'm taking notes and I'm emailing Phil right now about the tax bill and how do we get the brochure in there. But I'll say, so there is some new developments coming in front of us, and of those proposed new developments, there is, and this is what provoked some of my interest, was there is some wetlands that could be and or are on the proposed properties. So again, just trying to understand the ordinance more and helping facilitate that. We do have, we're working on a community survey. So annually we do a community survey to gather input on issues that relate around the community, and then how can we as a board and as our leadership address maybe some concerns and or what are we doing well, what can we add to our goals and our agenda. So that that survey has been allocated to a firm that's helping us develop that survey. So it's not coming in-house. And so we're kind of working as a board to determine the questions, the topics that will be there. And I think I posed this a long time ago, but we still have time as an environmental commission to add specific questions, or I can at least propose those questions to the committee to say, here's some of the things we want to know about. And I did have some specific things, but if there's anything regarding, and I know we have our own recycling survey or anything that you guys think that you want the community input on, I can certainly propose that to the board, and we still have time. I say that probably within the next 2 weeks. So if you think of something that you would like to know about, and or things that we can improve on or things that we need to focus on, certainly let me know, and I will work on that. That's one thing we have been working on quite a bit. I think right now that's pretty much my report.
Thank you. Moving on to brownfield redevelopment. Ned, do you have anything to report?
Yes, the May 20th meeting was canceled.
Okay, short report. I like it. Good. Let's see.
But we did also have a celebration to say goodbye to Mark. So that was actually, Mark was going to run that meeting because Peter Menser had already moved to East Lansing. And so then I think Mark figured, you know, he was so close to his retirement party that maybe we'd have BRA next week or next month. I mean, and I have no idea who's going to staff us, but that's a whole other subject.
Yeah. You'll find out at the next meeting probably. Yeah, the energy team met, and we basically we talked about a number of things, but one was what to do about education related to the citizen climate commitment, and we decided that we should continue to look for information that might be helpful to citizens as they kind of look into kind of different electric alternatives. And so we're hopefully going to identify some good information, further information that already exists. The other thing we talked about was that the energy team is going to make a presentation at the Green Dialogue the second Wednesday, which I think is June 9th at 8 o'clock. So we're going to have a short presentation. You know, Leroy for the Green Dialogues has been arranging short presentations, usually about one a month. So the energy team is going to do the next one on June 9th. And that's it for the energy team. Environmental justice. Any?
I'll take that one. I spoke a little bit about environmental justice and how the wetlands are related to that, but you know, it's the Michigan Environmental Justice Conference. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It was on line, and Rose and I attended a bunch of those sessions, and maybe other folks did as well. But I think Rose posted that link. I think it's an excellent start, and there's a whole group of folks at the state of Michigan who are committed to environmental justice, and it's a very, very exciting time. So,
Thank you. Yeah, let's see. Anything more on the green team, Leroy?
Or Tom, you want to add anything?
I think you've covered it, Leroy. The only other thing I would add, if we haven't said this yet, is we are planning to meet tomorrow evening. It'll be our first in-person meeting in quite some time, so I think people are looking forward to that. But they've been pretty active with the tree distribution and the bike recycling effort, and we're again meeting tomorrow to plan future activities for the summer.
Thank you, Tom.
If you'd like to join us, we'll be at 5 o'clock at the pavilion. It's open to anybody who's interested in helping with that.
Kendra, we're on to the Land Preservation Advisory Board.
I won't say much about that, again, because the wetlands are really connected to land pres. And so I'll just kind of, I know we're running short on time, so we'll save that for next time.
Bill, Planning Commission.
Yeah, the Planning Commission last met on May 24th, and the two public hearings it held at that time were 21050 M&J Management to rezone an approximately 5-acre parcel located at 1999 Saginaw Highway from commercial to industrial. If you think about where Meridian, the Meridian company is located, that area is kind of designated as commercial, industrial, professional, office, light industrial technology. Lots of ideas about what that might become, but they're looking to change that zoning category, and still working on the mixed-use plan unit development ordinance that it tries to encourage mixed uses on a given property. That's what the Planning Commission's been up to.
Okay, thank you. Next on the listed state of Michigan. I assume that has to be like the state legislature. And Tom, I know you retired from your job, so I don't know if you want us to still keep calling on you, or are you ready to?
Yeah, really nothing from my perspective to report under that at this point. I will say not so much environmental related, but local governments are facing some attacks on local control issues with the state legislature right now. So just to make you aware of that, in particular, local regulation of sand and gravel mining is under attack, as well as vacation rentals and kind of taking away control from locals in regulating those as well. So just be on guard, I guess, for some of those local preemptions.
Oh boy. Transportation Commission. Is that you, Bill?
Trying to get my screen back. Thank you. Yeah, to Tom's point about rental restrictions, my understanding is that has largely to do with this sort of on-demand kind of Airbnb type stuff. And for most of the township, that's not really a big deal, but for those parts of the township closer to Michigan State University, that is a huge deal and consumes a fair amount of the code enforcement energy. And I would note that our sort of more, one of our code enforcement officers is moving into that kind of rental area. So there seems to be some reallocation of resources there, which could really make sense. Transportation Commission has been mainly focused on both the pathways and the road improvements that are going on in the township this year. And I have personally seen plenty of notices going out for work that's going on in my own neighborhood. So I am encouraged that that information is making it out also to all the other neighborhoods where road improvements are and pathway improvements are being planned for this year. And finally, I understand that the Transportation Commission, I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, but is considering the issue of quiet, I've got the name wrong, but quiet zones for railroads, basically lessening the amount of times they. Personally, I want them to blow the horn, but I don't live there, so yeah.
Thank you, Bill. And let's see, well, the tree team, we've already talked about that. So we're on to further opportunity for public comment or if there's any other further comments from any of the commissioners or anybody participating here. Does anybody want to have some further comments or? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Okay, well, I guess then I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Anybody like to make that motion? Thank you. Second, Kendra, I think I saw your hand up. Courtney thirds it. Okay, all in favor of adjourning. I think this has been a great discussion, but all in favor, raise your hand. A great discussion, and I think we've made a good beginning on the wetland discussion, and obviously there's a lot more to talk about, a lot more to do. Hey, thank you, everybody, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Have a good evening, Mr. Harvey.